I really, really want to thank GMAble and GMAAN for having me, because this is really a special event for me because of the opportunity to talk to a company in an industry that you didn't see it in there, but that car that I was actually driving during the video is a 2016 Yukon Denali XL that I got there. Now, this isn't just a shameless plug for you, but it's just ironic that I'm here. That really had nothing to do with the invitation. That's the car that I got because of the mobility program that I'm sure many of you know that you have, that I found the opportunity to be able to have a car that then you gave some sort of assistance to be able to then modify the car to then get it. Because a lot of people need to put hand controls in, or a lift or a ramp or something, and that can be prohibitive. And so seeing a company that actually acknowledges the fact that there are people that may need a vehicle that you just can't get off of the market, and to do your best to try to fill that void in some way, is how I ended up coming to GM. And so to then find myself years later having this opportunity to speak to this group is really, it's humbling to me, and it really is some sort of a full circle opportunity that I am really the one that feels I'm benefiting from this opportunity, and I'm hoping that I can deliver something to you all that makes you feel some sort of benefit from me being here as well. So it really is an amazing chance to talk about what I say, which is disabusing disability. Now, I came up with that to say that too often I feel like what we do is we judge others based on what they cannot do, instead of allowing them to show us what they can do. Now, I have been blessed with innumerable amounts of opportunities in my life that I realize not everybody else has. And what I've done is I've started to acknowledge the privilege that I have, and what I'm trying to do is find opportunities to then fill the same void that GM is doing for others in the way that I can do in some small fashion. And so in my work in medicine, one of the ways that that is manifest is demonstrating the fact that too often we feel like someone can't do something, and if they can't do one task, we then assume that they can't do a litany of other tasks. And there's an image that I posted several weeks ago that's of the parking spot that I have at the hospital. It's a parking spot that says physician parking only, but then there's a handicap tag underneath it. Some people thought that was a mistake when they found the parking spot, and they tried to correct the parking and grounds people to say, you put two signs in the same place, that can't be right. Because most people thought there's no way that there's a physician that has a disability that's practicing here. Now, one of the things I tell people is, I don't blame others for having that thought, because our society and our culture doesn't really provide the opportunity for us to see something that we're not often exposed to. Even as an orthopedic surgeon that took care of individuals with spinal cord injuries, I did not truly understand or appreciate what life was like after I'd operated on someone. Even when they came back for follow-up appointments, I didn't necessarily know how they got there that day. I didn't know if they drove themselves. I didn't know if someone else drove them. I didn't know how they got out of their bed. I didn't know how they bathed. These are things that are seemingly insignificant to you at the time, but when you then are exposed to it by either your friend, your family, or you yourself going through it, it opens up this world that is a blind spot to so many of us. Now, this is just one example of something that people experience that you may not understand, which takes me to the other aspect of my job, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, I leverage disability and ability as just one example of what diversity can be, because I think too often we make the assumption that when we talk about diversity, we're speaking about race only, or we're speaking about gender only. But diversity is truly diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of opportunity, and there's so many other aspects in which we live in a diverse world, and there are people that have different experiences that bring a different skill set to the group that you're in. That then is why I feel truly blessed to have this chance to talk about something like this with this group. Now, I've heard that many of you are a rather technical group, and so one of the things that I was going to talk about in particular is the thing that I'm sitting in right now. So I don't know how obvious it was in that video, but this chair that I'm in is not sort of a regular wheelchair, right? It's a wheelchair that has allowed me to be more active and more functional in my medical world and just in the social world as well in everything that I do. When we talk about mobility, in this industry, you likely think about sort of mobility with respect to your vehicle. But when I think about mobility, I think about physical mobility, I think about financial mobility, I think about social mobility, and these are things that affect someone's life in many, many ways. The fact that I have this chair that allows me to do this has given me the opportunity to continue to operate on people because I can be literally and figuratively at the table in the operating room and not have to then have other accommodations that make people think because you're in a wheelchair, you can't do the same things that I can do. This chair also provides me with the physical mobility to travel without some large, bulky chair that I can't get into the back of my car. This also allows me to then have conversations with people at eye level, and I'm 6 feet 1 inch tall, and not that being tall is more important than being short, but I've lived all my life at this place. And when you realize that whether people do it intentionally or not, when people talk to me when I'm seated, they almost always treat me like I'm younger than I really am. They treat me like I'm someone different than they would have treated me if they'd walked into the room and seen a 225-pound, 6'1" individual who was an academic All-American athlete. Not that I think that I should be treated any better because of that, but that's another reality of our world, that people will treat you based on what they think of you. They will make assumptions of what they think you can and cannot do, and they'll interact with you from that lens. Once again, I bring back the point that I don't blame people for that. That's because of a lack of exposure to understanding that just because someone is different doesn't make them less than, doesn't make them unable. And I think that it gives us an opportunity with mobility to be able to spread this message to many, many more people, right? That message of showing that just because you may not yet understand how someone that's different from you can contribute doesn't mean that they can't contribute. So I tell a story about during my residency when I started off, as I said, as an orthopedic surgeon. After I had my injury, it's not that I could no longer do orthopedics, it's that I was given an opportunity to be a family physician at a program in Indiana. And I actually initially said no thank you because I thought it would mean giving up on my orthopedic career. But the second time they asked, they said, this is just an opportunity for you to continue practicing medicine and you don't even have to finish. And so I said, actually, that's a great opportunity. No education is an education poorly spent. And so I joined this family medicine residency program. Now, for those of you that might not be familiar with sort of medicine, this is another unfortunate truth that I will tell you. Just like you have in any industry, there is an unspoken hierarchy in medicine. And so I went from being an orthopedic surgeon, who was someone that is often considered at the top of that totem pole hierarchy, to then being a family physician. Now, I don't agree with that distinction, but that is once again the way that people will treat you. And as a family physician, you are then the low man or woman on the totem pole. To make matters worse, I'm now a family physician that is training in a community program in South Bend, Indiana. Now, some of you may not like South Bend, Indiana in this area for different reasons because of some of the institutions that may be located there. But South Bend is also not considered a center of excellence in academic medicine. And then to add another layer to that, I'm now an individual with a disability that's practicing family medicine at a rural program in South Bend. Now, there's one part of medicine that many people that are in it can understand. Obstetrics is a place where the nurses in obstetrics are sometimes considered sort of mother hen. And you don't mess with OB nurses. And so here I come as an ex-orthopedic surgeon in a wheelchair that's trying to come and deliver babies. What the OB department did is what I called, they assumed competence. They did not assume that just because I was different, I wouldn't be able to participate. They actually, once again, allowed me to show them what I could do. Before I had this chair, we created this device that it's called a steady. So it exists in the world. It's what they put women on after they get their spinal or their epidural and they can't walk around. And it's a device that sort of is positioned like this. And they put them on it to wheel them in and out of the bathroom so that they can use the restroom when they can't walk after they've gotten their spinal. We took that device and we put pillows and tape and all sorts of things on it so that when we had to go into the OR for me to do C-sections, I would go from my regular seated wheelchair and would transfer into this steady and then would be able to be at the operating room table. Now, OB is a place where if you're planning on a vaginal delivery and you have to quickly switch over to do a C-section, time is of the essence. And so that's another place where they could have excluded me and said, Dr. Okanlami, we really enjoy having you here, but this is just something that we can't put patient care at jeopardy and have you then involved in this case, so we're not going to be able to get you into the OR. But once again, they allowed me to show them what I could do, and before we even had the standing frame chair, I was in the OR. And then what they realized when they were in the OR with me is that, no disrespect to my family medicine peers that were in residency with me, but they now had a surgeon on the other side of that operating room table when you are quickly trying to get this baby out. So I did not have to ask certain questions about what needed to be done during the case. I was just able to work with them as a co-surgeon in getting that baby out. So they then realized it's actually an asset to have Dr. Okanlami there. Now, this is not something to give myself a pat on the back. It's just an example of what you may discover when you actually give other people a chance. What you may uncover when you allow someone to truly show you what they can do. And I am not the first or the best or the only example of this. This is why I told you I feel very, very privileged to be able to speak to you about this, because there are countless people that are out doing this work already, and I'm just trying to be a beacon to then point you in the direction of these other individuals. Because there's so much that we can learn from people that are different than us, whether it's race or gender or ethnicity or socioeconomic status. Having a diversity of experiences within your organization is something that has been proven to be better for your business and better for your person, period. Like, if you want to have a conversation about money, I can tell people how financially you will benefit from a diverse population. If you want to have a conversation about philanthropic gift giving, I can tell you that there are people that really love a story about little Timmy who wants to play basketball with his friends, and then you create an adaptive sports program for him where you can do that. For everyone that has their angle, there's a way that this makes sense if you allow the time to then listen to it. And I would love for everybody to do it for the right reason, which is just that this is truly caring for your fellow person and not treating anybody different just because they're different than you. But once again, I've said this a couple times, there's an unfortunate reality that not all of us think the same way. Not all of us are in the choir, and so sometimes you're preaching to the choir, but there are times that the people that are not even in the pews need to be brought to the table to understand why it's important. And so that's where we have an opportunity to leverage each chance we have to demonstrate the importance of this in a way that people hear it. With what you do here at GM, with your technology, with this entire building, with having the GMAAN group as well, that you have individual organizations that support people that are different. You put your importance in that, you actually dedicate time and resources to that. That is something that you don't see in many places, and that's why I commend all of you, not just for this event, but for what you do when this event isn't even going on. For having a mobility program that allowed me to be in the kick-butt car that I'm in right now that looks a lot nicer than a van rolling down the street. No offense to vans. But I thank you for having me. I look forward to some of the discussion that we will have here today, and really kudos and hats off to all of you.
Thank you, Doctor. So we absolutely want to talk to you some more. So we've set up a great discussion with another really fantastic GM team member. So I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Dane Parker. Dane is our director, or vice president of sustainable workplaces. He's also the executive champion of GMAble. And before Dane comes up, I just want to take a minute to speak about this event. The GMAble team has absolutely taken an opportunity and magnified it in such fantastic ways, including the invitation to the GMAAN team to join, as well as all the fantastic ways we want to share what Dr. Okanlami has to say to us. And so with that, Dane is going to add some more context and texture to this conversation, and we're going to have a little fireside chat. There'll be time for Q&A afterwards, so please start queuing your questions.
Thank you. All right, so what I'll do is I got a couple of questions that I'll ask Dr. O. First, as you're thinking of yours, but get your questions ready because I want to try to leave more time for the things that you might want to know. And I'll tell you, I've been inspired hearing you today and talking to you before. I've had the opportunity in many ways to kind of be blessed by diversity in my life, and I have a daughter who is differently abled, and I have friends who have given me the blessing of the diverse perspectives that you're sharing. And one of the things we talked about as we visited on the phone is how do we, as a company, and many of you are engineers, you're designing products and services and solutions, and you talked about the opportunity we have to see differently, and instead of seeing what people can't do, see what they can do, and how do we enable them to contribute, and in many ways, I think solutions for those who have a challenge make things easier for those who may not. So talk to us a bit about kind of your advice for those who are engineers and designers. How can they think differently to create solutions that benefit everybody?
Yeah, thanks, Dane. So that's a great point, and something that, once again, I only had the opportunity to see this in this way after I got this degree from Notre Dame in engineering, science, and technology entrepreneurship. It opened my eyes to problem solving in a way that I didn't do before. So rather than just seeing an obstacle and seeing that as a barrier, design thinking and technology gives you a way to actually figure out how you can have the user or have the person that has a problem be involved in the solution and help you come up with it. So I have a story that I actually tell that I was giving grand rounds earlier this year at Yale, my residency that I'd done for orthopedics, talking about something similar. And one of the faculty in the audience told a story about his son. So his son was in kindergarten and has homework that says, color the circle blue. And this man was racking his brain saying, I don't understand how my son is getting his homework done because he's colorblind. He's colorblind and it says, color the circle blue. So one day he said, Johnny, how do you get your homework done? It says color the circle blue, you're colorblind, what do you do? His son paused and gave him this perplexed look and said, Dad, I never use crayons that aren't labeled. And it is such a simple solution that if we see some problem, sometimes through our own lens, we don't know how that problem can be solved, right? But something that benefits everyone, right? That Crayola box with 100 crayons, I don't know which one is eggshell white and which one is Tampico orange or whatever. And so, yeah, you have something that's labeled that shows you the color. This is just one small example of another thing we talked about with respect to vehicles in your industry, autonomous vehicles. Autonomous self-driving cars are not being created with the intention of people with disabilities in mind. We know this, right? People are thinking about how easy it'll be to get to work, how I can get more work done, how there's safety implications, and it's great, and I commend that initiative. But what people are then acknowledging now is that if you create a self-driving vehicle that is safe, you are providing an opportunity for someone who may be blind, who may have some other sort of mobility impairment that would not have otherwise been able to get around, to get around. And so if you have the notion of universal design and you create access for everyone, you aren't just benefiting some small subset of people. Because often financiers are what the limiting factor are. And people say, the market isn't really there to do something like this for just this small group of people. But if you realize how that application can benefit many, many more people, and you allow the people that are going to use your product to give some sort of input into it, and you have an iterative design thinking process, you can make things for people that you would not have even have understood the potential implications and applications of it.
Outstanding. And I experienced that in a hotel. Some of you have seen the electronic cards that you get that are like little credit cards, and one of the challenges I have is I don't see very well. And as you pointed out in our earlier conversation, all of us have, or at some point will need some adaptability, something to help us in that. And for me, that's these, and I had the wrong ones, and I was having trouble seeing where the little mark was to put the card in. And I heard a creative hotel clerk cut the corner off one of the edges that's the opposite side. So you knew if you kept that cut corner off on the top, on the right, you were having it in the right place. And I thought that was a fantastic example of someone who, at no extra cost, no extra complexity, created a solution that not just helped those who might have visual impairment normally, but those who just forgot their glasses, that day. So I think that's an important, really important principle. And so I'll ask one more question, then I'll give you a chance. You said something that the staff did when you were in residency there in South Bend. I won't mention the school so nobody throws anything, although You're at both schools, so you get to wear whatever colors suit the day. But that they didn't see what you couldn't do. They assumed you could. Help us, how can each of us better see each other for what we can do instead of what we can't? How do we put ourselves in that mindset more often so we can be those work colleagues that for everybody else, for all of us?
The answer to that is something, I like to consider myself a pretty simple guy, right? And I've been in the process of writing a book, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to title this book. And I think I've settled on a title of Dear Alex. The reason I call it Dear Alex is my son that you saw in that video, his name is Alex. And I go around to schools, to companies, to different organizations having conversations like this. And what I realize is that the hardest questions that people ask me are the same things that I've been trying to teach my son. Don't judge a book by its cover. Treat everybody else the same as you. Share the things that you have. Put the toilet seat down. I mean, that seems like a silly one that you mentioned, but that's just something that you do to then acknowledge the fact that someone may do something differently than you do. And just because you were the last one to use this doesn't mean that you leave it in a way that someone else can't use it the way they need to. And so a lot of these things are actually very simple principles that if we truly believe that we all should have equal opportunity for things, it's not going to be difficult to at least allow your mind to say, I can see the potential in that other person, because everyone has potential. I don't know how they may demonstrate that to me, but I will at least give them an opportunity to show it. And as an industry, that is listening to people that may not have always had a voice or a seat at the table. Mm-hmm. It's being intentional about giving opportunities to people that previously didn't have them. And the tough part is that I'm also a very straight shooter. And I'm not talking about providing opportunities for people that aren't qualified just to hit quotas. I'm saying that there are plenty of qualified individuals that if you give opportunities to a diverse group, you will not be lowering your standard to have a diverse conversation. And so if you just think that everyone else has the same potential that you have, maybe I'm the only sort of arrogant person in the room, but if you think that you have something that you can bring to the table, then the other person sitting across the table or the person that's outside of the room has just as much, if not more.
Outstanding. Thank you. Very well said. So let's see. I'll turn it over. Is there anybody that we might have a mic, I guess, to get around to make sure that Folks, we got a mic, so anybody raise your hand if you've got a question you'd like to ask, and we'll get the mic over to you.
You got right here in the front.
So there's members of the team out here that design, build, and operate every building in General Motors. So from a tactical perspective, how might we create an environment that allows you to enable yourself to succeed every day? You came in here today, and I'd love to get your perspective. We had trouble with the ramp in the beginning, but I'd like to get your perspective on what you saw that we could do better to enable you.
So the question was that there are members of the team that design every building, GM, and how could we do a better job of essentially providing accessibility for people? Now, that answer is easy and difficult, because one of the things I say is, when you've met one person in a wheelchair, you've met one person in a wheelchair. And so I want to be very clear that my answers may not necessarily be the answer that then applies to every single situation. And so oftentimes I get that question either for accessibility, or I get that question in terms of giving opportunities to people, and people say, well, Dr. O, how am I ever going to know how I can help someone? Because what happens a lot for me is people will start to help me, and I don't need or want their help, right? And so there'll be things that people are trying to do me a favor, and that happens all the time. I'll be using my crutches or my walker to walk through a door, and let's say I have my walker. I will take one hand off to push the door open, and I'm balancing on that door as I then get in with my walker. Someone will come along and want to help me, and they're like, oh, let me get that for you. And I'll say, oh, no, thanks, I'm fine. But then they'll go push the door anyway, and then I'll almost stumble and fall, and they'll say, oh, thank goodness we arrived. That young man was going to fall, right? And I'm thinking in my head, I was doing just fine until you pushed the door open, right? But the reason that I tell that story is you just ask people, right? Like you just did, right? But if you ask people if they need help and how you can help, then you can get that answer. So the idea of universal design is something that I, once again, have just recently learned. This is not something that I've had years and years of experience in. But there are ways that we can create structures that then make accessibility for everyone. Now, it doesn't mean that every single place will be fully accessible to every single type of person at first. But having ramps instead of long staircases helps. Having no thresholds to go between levels helps. Those are little things. Having doorways that are wide enough for someone in a power chair helps. Having the automatic buttons on the wall for the door to open helps, right? And those are only things that I've experienced with my own level of physical mobility. But I have been humbled many times because I have put videos up that weren't captioned. And I've had people that reprimanded me saying, how can you talk about disability and put a video up that doesn't have captions? You know, how dare you? And I think too often we do this to each other, where we assume that one person is going to be all things to all people at all times. And no company can be all things to all people at all times. No building can be all things to all people at all times. But if you make an honest effort to attempt to make it accessible, you are going to be head and shoulders beyond what everybody else is doing. And then hopefully we will slowly move the needle such that what the standard is for accessibility changes. And then we then take the next step forward. Because, cliche, Rome wasn't built in a day. And so we're not going to be able to have every single tiny bit of accessibility in every corner of your building. But if you have an institutional mandate, imperative, dedication to trying to figure it out, and to including people, there are architects that work on this right now that I taught a class at Michigan called Design and Disability, right? And I showed a bunch of pictures of what I called accessibility fails, which are places where I have gone to cross a street and there's a curb cut out, but then there's a median so that I can't even get across the street. those are just simple things that if you may not see it yourself because you'll just walk down the thing, walk up the curb, walk down the curb and get in, but if you had somebody else, one of us, roll across the street and then you see now this young lady stuck in the middle of the road because she can't get across, then you say, oh, that's very simple. So I speak for too much, but having someone that may see things differently gives you the opportunity to say, all right, where can we improve? And then just like any other business plan, you then write out what the strategic plan is going to be 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. These are the things that we're going to actually budget to change. We may not be able to change them now, but we will show you the 5-10-year plan for how we plan to implement this so that when we have buildings, because I know that your buildings weren't then planned the day before you broke ground. They were planned years in advance. And when you then have the opportunity to plan the next set of buildings, you put those in there in the plans now.
Outstanding. And I think that's true of anybody that designs a product or an IT tool or anything else as well. Is great advice. Okay, others? We have time for a couple more questions.
Thank you. For all us engineers and technical people, how was that wheelchair designed?
So he said, how is this wheelchair designed? So I do not take, I can't claim responsibility for the original design of the chair. So the chair itself is a Permobile Lifestand Helium, which unfortunately is not actually manufactured in the States anymore. And they don't manufacture this chair, period, because of one of the things I brought up in terms of number and market size. They felt as though it was not, the market was not there. But what is the problem is that it's not that the market's not there, it's that the chair is prohibitively expensive for most people that would then be able to use it. But there are people that have many types of mobility limitations, not just spinal cord injuries, that could benefit from something that allows them to be able to maneuver and also be able to be upright. So I think that we could talk about how we actually market the chair to show its use. So mine, this one is actually powered by hydraulics. And so there is a hydraulic here that usually when you disengage the chair like this, if I'm quiet, you can hear a nope, I'm not, you can't hear it. But when you disengage it, it will shoot you up about halfway, and then you use your hands to then pull up the rest of the way, and then it locks out. Now for me, since I still have function in my legs, I made my hydraulic very, very weak, so I don't go anywhere when I disengage. I then am pushing into my foot plate in the ground to allow me to have a assisted sit to stand. So this, the black rod right here, has I think 400 newtons of energy that is then the piston, the hydraulic force that stands me up. And so it's actually quite simple, and it's something that we have in lots of other applications of things. You've got the doors that open and close that have this very, very similar feature. And so that's what this chair is, and they just don't have this in any other application. There are other standing frame chairs that have slightly different ways, some of them that ratchet up, which are great, but for me, as I told you, as I deliver babies, I can't have anything else that I'm holding on to. So when I pull that baby out, I then still have the baby in my hands that I can then put on mom's belly, right? And so that's why not having a ratchet feature allows me to be able to use this. And you can imagine in any other industry, if you're doing something and you need to be able to have both of your hands available to then pick something up, carry it up, put it somewhere, having an ability to do this, it's really, really opened doors for me, and that's how the sort of the simple change in this chair that has allowed me to do a lot more.
Just the other question too. You use a wheelchair, but you talk about a walker and other. How do you determine what type of mobility you want? What kind of situations?
So, if you've heard the phrase, "If you don't use it, you lose it." And I am in this in-between stage in terms of my mobility that I need to continue walking and I need to continue using the functional return that I've been blessed to have, but at the same time I need to be efficient in my life. And so I would love to use my crutches like you've seen and walk everywhere, but I would still be coming here from the conference room if I did that all day long, because I'm just not efficient yet in that. And so I have several different devices that I at first limited myself because I did not want to seemingly lose function because I was lazy, because I used a power chair, or because I use something called power assist wheels, or there are lots of different devices that I now use to save my shoulders, to be more efficient. And so I choose based on what I'm doing that day. So if I'm going to dinner and I'm just going to sit in one place, I will use my crutches because that allows me to walk and to strengthen a bit more. But if I'm going to be going to the hospital and parking far away and zipping between 6 different places, I have wheelchairs, and I have smaller wheelchairs that are lighter as well, that have, as I said, power assist wheels are something that as I give a little push, it actually assists me with more energy. And there's something else called a smart drive, which is a wheel that goes underneath the back of my chair that has essentially like a Fitbit type of monitor that similarly, it's Bluetooth controlled, and when it senses my push, it gives that little motor an extra push, and that one actually keeps me going so that I can push once or twice and then just continue maneuvering. And I've actually worked on creating this wheelchair walker combination that I can sit in a regular wheelchair and push around, but then I have handlebars on the back that aren't for someone else to push me, which is what most people assume. It's so that I can stand up and push myself and walk with the walker, because there are these rollator things that are in between, but you can't maneuver yourself when you sit down on your rollator. You're just stationary, right? And it's hard for anybody else to move you around because it doesn't have foot plates or anything like that. So I'm trying to get this in-between mobility thing that allows people to still be independent, to still be functional, to be efficient, but to not rely too much on assistance so that they can continue to progress.
All right, I think from a time perspective, I know, Andrea, you want to have a couple of closing remarks, but I would just say, on behalf of all of us, Dr. Okanlami, thank you. You said something earlier which struck me, which is when you've met one person in a wheelchair, you've met one person in a wheelchair. I think you're one of those one people that there aren't that many of in the world, and what you've accomplished in the young years that you've been at it is amazing. And I know you're going to do amazing things as you continue, and thank you for taking the time to come inspire us and build us up and give us a new perspective on how we can look at things and the opportunities we have to make a difference for good in the world, and you're clearly doing that. And so thank you on behalf of General Motors for being here. And Andrea, I don't know if you had a few words you wanted to share as we close.
So first of all, I want to introduce myself. I'm Andrea Munzenberger, and I am one of the co-chairs for GMAble. Our other co-chair is Jen Paget, who's standing over there. And we want to thank everybody who came out today. We're on a journey right now to increase awareness for really inclusivity for people with disabilities in the workplace at General Motors, and also beyond the workplace in our designs, and for our customers. So it is a journey. We know in the workplace we're trying to break down stigma, which I think, Doctor, you've done a really good job helping us towards that goal. I think your message was really excellent. So anyway, thank you for taking the time out to be here today, because you spending time, taking your lunch time to be here with us shows that you're actually interested in helping us along with this journey. And it really is an us thing. We need all of you to help us make strides towards that goal of inclusivity here in the workplace. So in addition to thanking them, I really want to thank you for coming today, Dr. Okanlami. Your message was very inspiring. A lot of things hit home for me, especially in your video. It kind of made me relive my journey with my daughter a little bit, and so that was very impactful. And on behalf of GMAAN as well, I know that your story is inspiring to members of that employee resource group as well. So for GMAble, just if any of you are interested in joining the resource group, we actually have a sign up over there. So we're always looking for active members, but we'll take passive members too, who just maybe want to join, get some information about our group, join our meetings once in a while. We have a Yammer group out there, just called GMAble, if you want to search on that. So once again, we just have a little token for you, and thank you again for coming to share with us today.
I meant it at the beginning when I said that I truly feel as though I've been the one that's blessed with this opportunity, because you say that I've given you something, and you say that I've opened your eyes, but you wouldn't have invited me had you not already been doing the work that you're doing, such that this is really just a chance for me to contribute to what's already being done here. So I want to thank all of you for what's already happening and continue to inspire each of us to then do better together, because you are doing the work. So I don't want you to shortchange yourselves for all that you have already done, and I hope will continue to do. So I want to thank you myself also.
I have one quick. You said you drove a Yukon, and I know that we have some engineers here who are working on future design vehicles, universal design, things like that. Do you transfer, or do you have a modification where you sit in your wheelchair in the vehicle?
So because of this sort of in-between state I'm in,
Yeah.
I've got a Bruno lift in
Okay.
the trunk of my car that I use for heavier things, but then I just walk around and hold on to the roof rack to
Okay.
then get into the car, and then I have hand controls that
Yep.
I drive with. So I have hand controls, I don't drive with my feet, I have hand
Okay.
controls, but I don't have a ramp to get in the car. I looked into it,
Yeah.
but what it would have taken to modify the inside of the car to then be able to put a ramp into the Yukon was
Probably
just-
costs more than the Yukon.
much more.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
For now.